Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In a space filled with unfamiliar aromas and subdued lighting, Grant found himself in the heart of Cassandra's apartment. The ambiance was adorned with luxurious perfumes and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. The morning's rays gently filtered through the blinds, painting the room with warm, angular patterns. An unexpected getaway to his cousin's home felt like a much-needed respite for Grant, who had been engulfed in endless work and a monotonous diet of microwave dinners. Contemplating his life, he realized that at 31, his existence seemed stuck in a time warp resembling the frugal lifestyle of a college student. As he relaxed on his cousin's couch, his gaze wandered towards the bathroom, where an array of mysterious cosmetic products waited. A pink sequined crop top caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across the steamy bathroom walls. When he finished showering, curiosity got the better of him. Cassandra had left for her Saturday yoga class and wouldn't be back for hours. The pink top dangled from his finger as he examined it. What was the appeal of these abbreviated shirts anyway? The fabric felt surprisingly substantial despite its delicate appearance. Ridiculous, he muttered, but something compelled him to hold it against his torso. At 6 feet tall with a runner's build, he kept in decent shape. His frame was narrower than most men his age, a fact that had once bothered him in high school, but eventually became just another physical trait he accepted. Without fully understanding why, Grant slipped the garment over his head. The sequins scratched slightly against his skin as the crop top settled just above his navel, exposing his flat stomach. He turned toward the foggy mirror and wiped a circle clear with his palm. The sight caught him off guard. The contrast of the feminine top against his masculine features wasn't as jarring as he'd expected. The pink complemented his olive skin tone, and the cut emphasized his slim waist. Something shifted in his chest, a strange flutter that wasn't entirely uncomfortable. He quickly removed the top, hung it back on the hook, and dressed in his usual jeans and navy button-down. By the time Cassandra returned, the incident seemed like a bizarre moment of madness best forgotten.
Thanks for letting me crash,
Grant said Sunday evening as he loaded his overnight bag into his car.
It was good to catch up.
Anytime, Cassandra hugged him. Just don't be such a stranger. Family should see each other more than twice a year. The 2-hour drive back to his apartment gave him too much time to think. The image in the mirror kept reappearing in his mind. It wasn't that he looked good in the crop top. Well, not exactly, but rather that he hadn't looked wrong in it. The thought followed him home and lingered as he unpacked. Monday brought the usual rush of emails and meetings at the marketing firm where Grant had worked for 6 years. By Wednesday, the bathroom incident had faded somewhat, but during his lunch break, his fingers seemed to move of their own accord, typing men's crop tops into a search bar. The results surprised him. There were options marketed specifically to men, but they didn't capture what he'd experienced with Cassandra's top. After hesitating, he refined his search to women's crop tops and found himself scrolling through pages of options. This is stupid, he muttered, closing the browser. But that evening at home, he opened his laptop again and revisited the site. Before he could overthink it, he added 3 items to his cart: a baby blue crop top with short sleeves, a black one with lace trim, and a red striped version that reminded him of something from the 90s. He selected express delivery without really understanding the urgency. 2 days later, a discreet package arrived. Grant left it sitting on his kitchen counter for hours, pretending it wasn't there while he cleaned his apartment and paid bills. Finally, when the sun had set and the apartment grew dark except for the glow of the television, he opened the box. The baby blue top came out first. The material felt soft between his fingers. Nothing like the scratchy sequins from the bathroom. His heart pounded as he removed his t-shirt and pulled the crop top on instead. It fit surprisingly well, the hem sitting just above his navel as he stood before his bedroom mirror. The reflection startled him, not because it looked ridiculous as he'd feared, but because it looked right somehow. The blue brought out flecks of color in his brown eyes he'd never noticed before. He turned to see his profile, noting how the cut emphasized his torso's natural lines. Over the next week, Grant established a new routine. At work, he was the same efficient, somewhat reserved marketing analyst he'd always been, but at home, after checking that his blinds were securely closed, he would change into one of his crop tops and just exist. Sometimes he'd cook dinner or watch TV. Occasionally he'd clean or answer emails. Normal activities, but they felt different. Freer somehow. The online shopping continued. 2 more crop tops. Then a simple black skirt that arrived in a package he opened with trembling hands. The first time he wore the skirt with the blue crop top, he stood before the mirror for nearly an hour, transfixed by the transformation created by just 2 pieces of fabric. His brown hair, usually cut in a standard short style, seemed too masculine with the outfit. On impulse, he ordered a wig, medium length with subtle waves in a light brown shade. When it arrived, the quality exceeded his expectations. Arranging it on his head took practice, but the result was worth the effort. The face staring back from the mirror was his, but somehow different, softer. His features had always been on the delicate side. High cheekbones, large eyes, a jawline firm, but not aggressively square. With the wig framing his face, these qualities seemed to harmonize in a new way. Makeup came next. Tentative experiments with products bought at a drugstore 20 miles from his apartment. He watched countless online tutorials, practiced removing every trace before bed, and gradually developed skill with foundation, mascara, and lip gloss. 3 months into this private transformation, Grant realized he needed a name for this other self. Elizabeth came to mind immediately, his grandmother's name, a woman who had always encouraged him to be authentic. It felt right. Elizabeth began to take form, developing tastes and preferences distinct from Grant's. She liked floral scents, preferred skirts to pants, and loved the color blue. She was becoming someone real, someone with substance. The division between lives grew increasingly difficult to maintain. Grant found himself distracted during meetings, thinking about a new eyeshadow technique Elizabeth wanted to try. He declined after-work drinks because Elizabeth was waiting at home. One rainy Friday evening, as he unlocked his apartment door, a sudden desire for change overtook him. He'd read about people living part-time as their true selves, and the thought of taking Elizabeth outside the apartment walls made his pulse quicken.
Just once,
he whispered to the empty apartment.
Just to see.
He chose a relatively conservative outfit, the black skirt paired with a dark blue blouse he'd recently purchased, black tights, and low-heeled ankle boots. The brown wig was carefully styled, makeup applied with extra attention. He'd practiced walking in the boots for weeks, pacing his living room until the movements felt natural. The cafe he selected was across town, a place unlikely to contain anyone from work. As he parked, panic nearly sent him driving home, but Elizabeth's desire to exist in the world proved stronger than fear. The first steps from the car to the cafe entrance were the hardest he'd ever taken. Each click of his heels on pavement sounded thunderous to his ears. But no one stopped him. No one stared. No one seemed to notice anything unusual at all. "Coffee, please. Just black," she ordered, her voice pitched slightly higher than Grant's, but not unnaturally so. The barista nodded, asked for a name for the order.
Elizabeth,
she responded without hesitation. "That'll be right up, Elizabeth." Hearing someone else speak her name aloud sent a rush of emotion through her chest. She found a small table in the corner and sat, watching the normal Friday evening activity swirl around her. People chatted, typed on laptops, or read books. No one paid her any particular attention. When the barista called Elizabeth, she rose and collected her coffee with a quiet, "Thank you." The entire interaction lasted less than 5 seconds, but it felt monumental. 2 hours passed as Elizabeth sipped her coffee and then ordered a second. She observed the various fashion choices of women in the cafe, mentally noting outfit combinations she might try. Occasionally, she smiled at the novel sensation of being herself in public. The drive home felt different. Grant didn't return when she started the car. Elizabeth remained, considering the possibilities this single outing had revealed. Over the following weeks, Elizabeth ventured out more frequently. A bookstore where she purchased poetry, a small clothing boutique where she bought a sundress after the saleswoman complimented how the blue pattern brought out her eyes, a grocery store where she chatted briefly with an elderly man about the ripeness of avocados. Each successful interaction built her confidence. The careful division between Grant and Elizabeth began to blur. At work, Grant found himself adopting some of Elizabeth's mannerisms, a certain way of gesturing when speaking, a more melodic cadence to his speech. At home, Elizabeth sometimes caught herself standing with Grant's characteristic posture, feet planted firmly as if prepared to defend a position. 6 months into this dual existence, Elizabeth sat at her vanity table, a recent purchase that transformed the spare bedroom into her room, and considered her reflection. The foundation covered the shadow of facial hair that had grown during the day at work. The brown wig sat perfectly on her head, the waves framing her face in a flattering manner. She was beautiful, not in a conventional sense perhaps, but in her own unique way. A realization struck her with sudden clarity. Grant was the costume, not Elizabeth. The next morning, she called in sick to work. After 3 cups of coffee and hours of research, she found a therapist specializing in gender identity. The first available appointment was 3 weeks away, but she took it, marking the date on her calendar with shaking hands. Those 3 weeks passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Grant appeared at work, performed his duties adequately, if somewhat distractedly, and returned home each evening to melt into Elizabeth, who spent hours online learning, reading, connecting with others who shared similar experiences. The therapist's office featured muted colors and comfortable furniture, a space designed to put clients at ease. Dr. Marina Powell, a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a direct manner, listened intently as Elizabeth, who had arrived dressed as Grant out of uncertainty, explained the past several months.
what you're describing is not uncommon,
Dr. Powell said when he finished speaking.
Many people experience gender dysphoria for years before recognizing it for what it is. Dysphoria,
He repeated, testing the word.
That's when your gender identity doesn't match your body, right?
In simplified terms, yes. It manifests differently for everyone. Some people feel it acutely from childhood, others discover it later in life. There's no wrong time to recognize your authentic self. Over the next several sessions, Elizabeth emerged more fully in the therapy room. By the 3rd appointment, she arrived dressed as herself, wearing the blue sundress from the boutique. Dr. Powell simply smiled and continued their conversation without comment on the change in appearance. Together, they created a plan, small steps toward living authentically. Elizabeth began growing out her hair, which fortunately had always been thick and healthy. As her natural hair grew, she grew accustomed to wearing the brown wig less frequently, though she kept it for days when she needed the confidence boost. Medical interventions were discussed as options for the future, but Elizabeth decided to focus first on social transition. She practiced her voice daily, following exercises designed to raise her pitch naturally without strain. She refined her wardrobe, donating Grant's clothes except for a few practical items. She researched legal name changes and began compiling the necessary documentation. The most daunting task remained, telling people in her life. She began with Cassandra, meeting her for coffee 6 months after that fateful weekend visit. "I have something important to share with you," Elizabeth said, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug to hide their trembling. Cassandra looked up from her phone, expression curious. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in Elizabeth's appearance, the styled brown hair now reaching her shoulders, the subtle makeup, the blue blouse and black pants that were unmistakably from the women's department. "Grant?" Cassandra said hesitantly. "Elizabeth, actually." She took a deep breath. "I'm transgender. I've been working with a therapist and I'm transitioning. I've known for a while now, but it started becoming clear that weekend I stayed with you. Do you remember that pink crop top in your bathroom?" Understanding dawned on Cassandra's face. "You tried it on, didn't you?" Elizabeth nodded, relief flooding through her at the lack of judgment in her cousin's voice. "Well," Cassandra reached across the table and squeezed Elizabeth's hand. "It looks like I have a cousin named Elizabeth now, and between us, you have much better fashion sense than Grant ever did." The laugh that bubbled up from Elizabeth's chest felt like the first real one of her life. Work presented a more complex challenge. After consulting with HR and her therapist, Elizabeth developed a transition plan for the office. Her supervisor, a pragmatic woman named Denise, surprised her with immediate support. "Your work has always been exceptional," Denise said after Elizabeth explained her situation. "That's what matters to this company. We'll make this transition as smooth as possible." An email went out to the staff, professionally worded and straightforward. Elizabeth would be using a new name and feminine pronouns effective the following Monday. A separate note provided resources for anyone with questions about transgender identities, directing them to HR rather than to Elizabeth herself. The weekend before her first day as Elizabeth at work stretched endlessly. She prepared meticulously, laying out her outfit, a conservative navy dress with a cardigan, practicing responses to potential questions, reminding herself to breathe. When Monday finally arrived, she stood before her mirror, barely recognizing the confident woman who gazed back. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "You've been doing it your whole life without realizing it." The office fell silent when she stepped off the elevator. She nodded politely, making her way to her desk with practiced poise. The initial awkwardness dissipated as the day progressed. Most colleagues simply said good morning and continued their work. A few offered supportive smiles or compliments on her dress. Only one person, an older account manager from the 4th floor, made a point of using her former name, but the mistake was promptly corrected by a nearby coworker. By Wednesday, the novelty had largely worn off. Elizabeth found herself absorbed in projects, participating in meetings, and exchanging jokes with colleagues, just as she always had, except now as her authentic self. 1 year after first trying on Cassandra's pink crop top, Elizabeth sat in her redecorated apartment, surrounded by friends gathered to celebrate her name change becoming legal. The court appearance had been brief and unremarkable. A judge signed a document, and Elizabeth Marie Campbell officially replaced the name given at birth. To Elizabeth, Cassandra raised a glass of champagne, who had the courage to become herself. Glasses clinked, and Elizabeth felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the champagne. Her gaze moved around the room, to her friends from work, to new friends made through support groups, to Cassandra, who had been steadfast in her support. "Thank you all," Elizabeth said, her voice confident in its feminine register after months of practice. "I couldn't have done this without you." Later, after the guests departed, Elizabeth stood on her balcony watching the city lights. The blue dress she wore, a favorite for special occasions, caught the evening breeze. Her brown hair, now grown past her shoulders, moved softly around her face. She thought about the journey, from that first glimpse in the bathroom mirror to this moment of complete authenticity. There had been difficult days, certainly. Not everyone had been supportive. Her parents were still adjusting, communicating via cautious phone calls and occasional strained visits. Some friends had drifted away, but new connections had formed, deeper and more authentic than those founded on the performance of being someone she wasn't. The crop tops that started everything hung in a special section of her closet, the baby blue one most worn, showing signs of frequent washing. She still wore them occasionally, paired with high-waisted skirts or jeans, but their significance had evolved from clothing that helped her discover herself to simply favorite items in her wardrobe. Elizabeth's phone chimed with a message from a dating app she'd recently joined. After careful consideration, she had created a profile that was honest about her identity. The message was from a woman named Rebecca, who had asked if Elizabeth would like to meet for coffee that weekend. Their conversation had flowed naturally over the past few days, discussing everything from favorite books to career aspirations. Smiling, Elizabeth typed a response accepting the invitation. The prospect of dating still frightened her somewhat, but like everything else in this journey, she would approach it one step at a time. As she prepared for bed that night, Elizabeth caught sight of an old photo tucked into the corner of her mirror. Grant, at a company retreat 2 years earlier. The person in the photo smiled stiffly at the camera, eyes revealing a discomfort that had been constant but unrecognized. Elizabeth touched the image gently. "Thank you," she whispered to her former self, "for finally letting me live." The coffee date with Rebecca blossomed into dinner the following week, then a museum visit, then regular meetings that evolved naturally into a relationship. Rebecca, a landscape architect with a quick wit and patient heart, became Elizabeth's steadfast companion through further milestones. When Elizabeth decided to pursue hormone therapy after extensive consultation with medical professionals, Rebecca accompanied her to appointments, helped research side effects, and celebrated each subtle change. When mood swings made Elizabeth uncertain and irritable, Rebecca offered understanding without condescension. When happy tears came at the first noticeable softening of Elizabeth's facial features, Rebecca cried with her. On the anniversary of her legal name change, Rebecca suggested they return to the cafe where Elizabeth had first ventured out publicly. They sat at the same corner table, now as a couple rather than a nervous woman alone. "I have something for you," Rebecca said, sliding a small box across the table. Inside lay a delicate silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a crop top. Elizabeth laughed through sudden tears. "Did Cassandra tell you about that?" "She mentioned it was where your journey started." Rebecca reached across the table to hold Elizabeth's hand. "I thought you might like a reminder of how far you've come." Elizabeth fastened the necklace immediately, the pendant resting perfectly against her blue blouse. "It's perfect, thank you." 2 years after that first weekend at Cassandra's apartment, Elizabeth stood before a full-length mirror in her bedroom. The reflection showed a confident woman with shoulder-length brown hair styled in loose waves, wearing a blue dress that complemented her figure. The silver crop-top pendant glinted at her throat. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca. "Leaving now. Can't wait to see you. Love you." Elizabeth smiled, typing back a quick response before gathering her purse. Tonight was a celebration dinner. Earlier that day, she had received a promotion at work, becoming the marketing team's new creative director. The position recognized her talents rather than her gender, exactly as it should be. As she locked her apartment door, Elizabeth thought about the journey her life had taken. From a borrowed pink crop top to finding her true self, from hiding behind drawn blinds to living openly and authentically. The path hadn't always been smooth, but every step had led her closer to harmony between her inner and outer selves. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and Elizabeth stepped forward into her continuing story, not as a person divided, but as a woman whole and complete in herself.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!